Well, thanks for coming back. Last program we did, Rome Yesterday and Today, Part 1, was dealing with the St. Peter's Basilica, the Vatican, the museums, etc. Today's program is going to be a little different. We're going to be dealing with the area around the Colosseum. And I think it's going to be interesting, but it's going to be fast. Needless to say, with Italy being locked down now because of the coronavirus, I want you to see as much as possible, and I want you to get as much as possible, but on the other hand, I don't want you to lose anything. Okay, so let's start off. As you see the map here, the Colosseum's down here on the center right-hand side, the Roman Forum, where the political base was, and then Palatine Hill. These are the three areas that we'll be talking about today. Nero fiddles while Rome burns. That was a story that's been spread forever. That was what can you say? It's one of those things, everybody blames whoever's in charge for whatever catastrophe that happens. Like today, it's not true. Okay, the story that he fiddled while Rome burned, never mind that the fiddle was not, put together for another 1,500 years, but the accounts that he did nothing were absolutely incorrect. He came back from his vacation home, coordinated the response. He imported food for the hungry. He opened up the public gardens and things. 70% of Rome burned, okay, during this fire. And it was just a terrible situation. They didn't know what to do. Most of the homes at that time were built of the wood around the city, of the 7 hills, which we talked about the last time. And then he kept doing things, but people kept blaming him. The online Oxford Dictionary specifically states being concerned with relatively trivial matters while ignoring the serious or disastrous events going on around them. We have that going on today, with our Congress. They're letting trivial things go while we have important things. After the fire, though, Nero planned one of the first ever building codes, changing them from their wooden structures to structures made of stone or brick, so they would not, in fact, ever go through that problem again. The next slide you see is the Colosseum. The Colosseum, whenever it was built, it did a lot of things. It brought the people together, and we'll see why here in a second. It was done under the Flavian dynasty. The picture, which you'll see on one of the next slides, is still there in tribute to the Flavian dynasty, and that has been there for a couple thousand years. The Colosseum sat as many as 50 to 80,000 people, and the reason why that difference was, you see it there with ships. They would actually do battles. They would depict battles that had taken place that, of course, the Romans were victorious in. But they would then take up a number of the front seats, so everybody had to go up. That's why the numbers changed so much. It was used for bloody displays, animal hunts, which involved many slayings of wild animals. PETA would be going nuts at this point. Why was the Colosseum built? Find out exactly what happens today. The building of the ancient Colosseum was widely regarded as a political move. What was basically done, it was done to, in fact, take people's minds off of their world today that they lived in. It was to take their minds off of the political corruption that was going place in the Senate and the church. Okay, once again, the church just relatively started out, the Christian church at least, but there were a bunch of other churches and everybody was fighting for power. Things don't really change, do they? More facts on the Colosseum. You'll see as you look at the slide that there are a number of statues in the middle of the Colosseum here. If we can go to the slide. Okay, you'll see this. No one knows where those statues went. They were stolen, basically. This is a statue of Nero, and we'll find out that the people basically tore that down and melted it down as time went on. The Colosseum was designated as a World Heritage Site by UNESCO, and once again, the reason for the Colosseum being built was to take the people's minds off of everything. And the gladiatorial combat took place up until 404 AD, when a monk named Armaccio lost his life during a protest demonstration, and they stopped them. The upper arches, once again, had statues. If you look at some of the pages on the website, this is why you shouldn't always trust the pages on the website, it talks about these statues being moved over to St. Peter's Basilica, which is in fact absolutely incorrect. The statues on St. Peter's Basilica were in fact made by the disciples of Bernini. The west gate of the Colosseum was called the Gate of Death because this was the exit that the dead gladiators were taken out of. The southern side of the Colosseum collapsed in a massive earthquake in 847. One of the interesting things that we found out is the botanists have been watching this area for hundreds, if not thousands of years. And they, in fact, found over 337 different plant life there. So, I mean, like I said, this is an area that's been watched for many years. The Colosseum appears, I found this out too, that each country has the opportunity to coin their own euros. And Italy coined this one with the 5-cent euro coin with Colosseum on it. As you see there, a picture of the movie Gladiator with Russell Crowe. They, in fact, got the rights to actually do this in the Colosseum, all the scenes and everything else, but then the red tape was so much they decided to build their own Colosseum for the movie and in fact have the battles there. More facts about the Roman Colosseum. Emperor Vespasian and his son Titus had conquered Jerusalem, and they had brought back with them many spoils of war, including about 100,000 Jews that they in fact put to work. Okay, whenever I say put to work, I mean put to work. Many of these men were used to, in fact, drag stones 16 miles from Trivolia to, in fact, Rome. The sheer quantity of the slaughter that took place in the Colosseum saw numbers of lions and jaguars and tigers plummet through the globe. They would go out and get these. One example, after a particularly brutal set of games, over 9,000 animals were killed. I mean, it was just terrible. And they slaughtered hippos, which disappeared from the Nile. All right? I mean, the things that they did were absolutely horrendous when you look at anything that they could, in fact, make sense of today. More pictures of the Colosseum. One of the few things that you see here on the left-hand side, this cross was put up many years ago, and this was for those who have passed away in the Colosseum. The one on the right, picture on the right you see was in fact for the amphitheater of Flavian, and the center picture was a picture I took from the Royal Art Cafe at 8 o'clock in the morning when we sat there eating our croissant. By the way, it was the best croissant I ever had, and in fact, before the crowds rushed in. This was sort of one of those things that you have to make note of. Okay, the seating in the Colosseum, the arrangements are such. You see down here in the bottom, these marble seats, well, they coincide with the senator's position. The knights and the plebeians all sit in the middle part here, and the poor women and slaves all sat up here. When we're talking about the cheap seats, these are really the cheap seats. They're about a foot wide and a foot high. So if they're going to come and watch any activity, one, they can hardly see them, and two, they're going to be really uncomfortable because they don't have anything to sit on. If you remember the map from the very beginning, the Arch of Constantine is right next to the Colosseum. All right? The arch was dedicated to the Emperor Constantine the Great. The arch was commissioned by the Roman Senate to commemorate Constantine's victory over the Battle of Milvian Bridge in 312 AD. Situated between the Colosseum and the Palatine Hill, the arch spans the Via Triumphis, the route taken by victorious military leaders. Though dedicated to Constantine, much of the sculpture dedication consists of reliefs and statues that are dedicated to Trajan, Hadrian, which is a name that keeps coming back up. Once again, he was born in Italica outside of Seville, Spain, and Marcus Aurelius. The Arch of Titus. They like their arches around here, okay? The Arch of Titus is one that fulfilled a biblical comment made supposedly by Jesus saying that there would be a time in Jerusalem whenever all the bricks would be torn down. The Romans made that happen, and they took everything they possibly could. Like I said earlier, they took 100,000 prisoners to come back to work on the different public projects and everything that they had. As you see on the upper side here, they are carrying Jewish symbols. The Roman soldiers were in stone here carrying Jewish symbols, a menorah, out of the temple before they destroyed it. This the Arch of Titus is on its way up to the Palatine Hill, and that's where all of the emperors lived almost from the very beginning, including Romulus, who in fact was the founder. The Palatine Hill is a place above, and you'll see a really great picture here in a couple minutes, a great picture that overlooks the Colosseum and everything else. It gives them the opportunity to look over the Circus Maximus as well as the Colosseum and the arches and things like that, as well as overlooking the Roman Forum. Okay. The Palatine Hill, Palatino as it says, which is the centermost of the 7 hills of Rome, which we talked about the last time. It stands about 40 meters above the Roman Forum, looking down on the side on the Circus Maximus, as we talked about. All right. The Great Fire of 64 destroyed Nero's palace, and that didn't seem to stop him because he built a larger palace up on Palatine Hill. But the location where the Colosseum is where Nero's palace used to be. The importance of Palatine Hill was, like I said, it was the head of everything. It was where all of the great emperors and all the senators and everything that were important. Augustus is said to have a relatively modest villa here, and the problem is, as you'll see down here at the bottom, Domus Augustana was the palace of Augustus, and it was only 100 meters wide and 250 meters long, which makes it about 300 feet wide and about 650 or so feet long. And that was considered to be relatively modest in those days. Domus Augustina, once again, it's you see, this is a place of worship. Okay, and we're going to run real fast a YouTube video here that shows, it'll give you a little idea on the kind of place this was. Okay, once again, that was just an idea to give you here on what it had to offer. Let me pull this back up again if I can. Okay, well, we're just going to have to go with it as it is, I guess. Okay, the and I can't even pronounce that. What these were students. They were slaves, but they were students at the same time. If you ever watched Spartacus, for example, they would take slave children, teach them music, teach them other things, and in fact have them work at these homes. So if the children of the emperor or something wanted to talk to somebody, they would have somebody to talk to. Usually they took Greeks to do this because, once again, they were the most educated and the most thought of to be the smartest in the world around them. Well, I was talking about the view from the Palatine Hill. This is the one that I took. It's probably the best. You can see the Arch of Constantine here to the right, but you see the Colosseum in the center. Needless to say, it's a beautiful sight from there. It's just as nice looking over to the other side, which would be to the Roman Forum. 6 facts about the Circus Maximus. Okay, it's considered to be the largest stadium in ancient Rome. First stadium built by the Romans. Actually, the Circus Maximus started out where the Vatican is today. And then whenever they acknowledged that the Christians needed a place to, in fact, build their church, they moved it over to next to the Palatine Hill. It was first constructed in 6 BC, all right. Made a lot of improvements during the time. Excuse me. Once again, I mentioned the Palatine Hill being the home of the royal families and the emperor. It was basically for chariot races, which you see in the movie Ben-Hur. But in fact, it was used for gladiator fights and things like that. The Circus Maximus, as you see here, the picture up on the right-hand side there was what it looks like today. Picture on the left-hand, or in the center, was what it looked like back then. And you'll see this obelisk there in the middle. That was the one that was moved over to St. Peter's Basilica. Okay, but it's said that Caligula, which everybody has heard of or knows about his history, was particularly upset one day because of the noise. You see that there's his house here on the left of this center picture, and he was upset with the noise. So he sent his guards down to beat up the people to shut them up. It's not really, something that would work well in today's political world. Palatine Hill, once again, this is a recreation. All you see now is bricks and some walls and things. But, once again, as you saw that video, it's a place that we could probably all live in without any problem whatsoever. The Palatine Hill is considered to be a place where Rome was born. Okay. Once again, if you look at this picture over the far left-hand side is where Romulus's hut was located, and that's where they still have the site today blocked off, so you can go see it. And it's one of those things that once again, he was the one who founded Rome, and it moved on from there. Like Beverly Hills and Hollywood, this became one of the most affluent areas to be in. It was a coveted address. And it was the place where the emperors went and made all their decisions. This is a picture of comparison. You see the buildings down here as it is today at the lower, and then you'll see these same buildings up here on the upper. So it gives you an idea on exactly what it looked like back then, based on the drawings and the maps and the buildings pictures that they had from those days. It sat more than 250,000 people, which was about 1/3 or 1/4 of the population of Rome at the time. The House of Augustus, once again, we saw how big that was, and to give an example of what it had in it, the picture on the left is a drawing of what the picture on the right of today would have looked like back then. Okay, so that's, once again, it's one of those things when you look at it, it's quite phenomenal. I think any of us could live there quite comfortably if we were in that part. Now, if you were in the other part of Rome that was living on the streets, it'd be a little tougher to take. The House of Livia. Livia is, she's connected all the way around no matter what. Okay, it's also known as Julia Augusta, after her formal adoption into the Julian family in AD 14, was the wife of the Roman Emperor Augustus throughout his reign, as well as his advisor. She was the mother of the Emperor Tiberius, paternal grandmother of the Emperor Claudius, paternal great-grandmother of the Emperor Caligula, and maternal great-great-grandmother of the Emperor Nero. So like I said, she was well connected politically. She is deified by Claudius, who acknowledged her title of Augusta. It was against the law to speak against her. You could actually be killed for doing that. And her house is interesting because, once again, It wasn't. It was separate rooms collected by a large entryway in front of it, but it had, as you see, the left-hand room had winged female figures over it. The center room was known as the room of Polyphemus, and the right-hand room was the House of Lydia, characterized by her festooned fruits and flowers. San Sebastiano el Palatino. Okay, this was the church that, in fact, was on the Palatine Hill. Okay, it served as the worship place mostly for, well, it turned into a Catholic worship place over the years, but Sebastian was a martyr, and as you see there, it was not a good trip for him. All right, his sentence was one befitting a soldier because he was a Praetorian Guard. He had to act as a target for bow and arrow practice, which I don't think that's very upstanding, but this did not kill him, and he was rescued by a woman named Irene who nursed him back to health. When he was able, he confronted the emperor about his sins, namely the persecution of Christians. The emperor ordered him to be beaten to death and thrown into the Cloaca Maxima. Sebastian's body was removed by another pious woman, and he was buried in the catacombs of the church, which would later be called San Sebastiano. He was one of San Sebastiano was one of the 7 pilgrims churches of Rome. So that was one of the beginning. The Palatine Museum. Now this is all these things are just in this one area. So when we're looking at this, we have to look at it from what it's offering society today as versus what it offered them before. The whole Palatine Hill could be considered a museum. Every aspect of it. It has so many wonderful things, but this is they actually have a museum where you can go to in fact see this. The archaeological remains located at Rome's Palatine Hill were among the most fascinating in Italy, but the treasures recovered during excavations here kept inside the Palatine Museum. Hilltop Museum is a home to a collection of artifacts, sculptures, frescoes, mosaics dating from before Rome was officially founded to the golden age of the Palatine Hill. As you see there, this statue of the Vestal Virgin was dates back to the 2nd century. Okay, the portrait bust of Nero. As you see, he had his nose knocked off. They didn't like him too much, but that's sitting up there too. The Palatine Hill, 3 female herms. Now these, like I said, the interesting aspects of all of these things are certainly things that we're not used to. But as you see in 1869, these were found and built by Augusta after the victory of Actium over Antony and Cleopatra. They have been interpreted as 3 of the 50 herms of the daughters of Danaus, king of Libya. Perhaps together with an equal number of statues of sons of his brothers, the king of Egypt, they decorated the large portico overlooking the valley of the Circus Maximus. Okay, with one arm raised, they supported a receptacle on their heads, probably pierced because they killed their cousins, to whom they were engaged to. They were condemned by Zeus to fill large wineskins with holes in them. Like I said, the history of all of this aspect of Rome and that period of time was one, very, very hostile to each other, as well as terrible to everybody around them. Okay. The Roman baths. Okay. This is interesting because we consider, when we think of Roman baths, we think of just people slopping around in a big pool of water or something. The most affluent Romans were accompanied by at least 2 servants to help them. Okay, and whenever they went to the baths, it wasn't just for the bath. It was for the political connections. It was for the social gathering that they had. These places not only had different baths, they had saunas, they had masseuses, they had everything like that, but they in fact went for the libraries were in there. the Caracalla baths that we'll talk about here in a minute were larger in ground than the Colosseum. So when we're talking about 1,600 people could be in here at once, and it had about 6,000 to 8,000 people visited a day. All the Roman citizens were allowed to come into the baths. Okay, Caracalla, I mentioned his name, was co-ruler with his father, Emperor Severus, from 198 CE, and later ruled with his brother Geta, emperor, from 209. Caracalla had his brother killed and became the sole emperor of Rome. Now, as you know, we talk about this as just happening in Rome. It happened in almost every country that was over in Europe. When we talk about Spain and the Moorish kings in Spain, each one of them, over the history of about 400 years, was killed mostly by a relative, a son, somebody wanting to take their place. So what we're, let me see here. Okay, the last slide we're going to look at in this section will be the Aqua Marcia Aqueduct. All right, there were 11 aqueducts that serviced Rome to bring fresh water. Okay, some of these, like I said, outside of Seville, Spain, the aqueduct I think I mentioned dropped between 6 to 8 inches, and it's 60 miles. It would be almost impossible to do that today. But in these aqueducts, this was clean water that was brought. They used to get their water out of the Tiber River, but in fact it became polluted over the period of time. They decided to transport the fresh water from the mountains to the city, and that's what started to happen. Now, the strange thing about this, only about 12% of the Marcia was above ground and arched conduits, with the remainder underground. So they had piping systems to run this water over the aqueducts before it got to them. If you were wealthy, you could tap yourself into these. As you see at the lower picture, they had maybe a wealthy person that had his aqueduct to his house or his property or his estate. That was against the law, but of course you could pay your way out of it if you knew the right people. Well, we're going to stop for this section right now, and we'll come back on the other side. Hope you join us again. Well, thanks for coming back. Once again, we were at the Aqua Marcia Aqueduct before we left for break. I want to point out one thing. This was one of the longest aqueducts that fed Rome water. It's 56 miles long, and it started out at 318 feet up in the mountains, and it in fact came down to 59 feet, and that was a drop of about a foot every 1,000 feet. Which, like I said, it's almost impossible to do that kind of engineering today. Okay. Okay. Moving right past the Roman Forum. The buildings in the Forum date back to as early as 7th century BC. On the northern end of the Forum is the Capitine Hill. Are some of the oldest ruins in the Forum, including marble remnants from the Basilica Aemilia, the Curia, where Roman senators assembled in their Austria, a platform which early orators gave speeches. By the 1st century BC, when Rome began its reign over the Mediterranean and large swaths of Europe, numerous constructions went up from the Forum. The Temple of Saturn and Tiberian, the state archives. They were both built around 78 BC. Julius Caesar began building the Basilica Julia, meant to be a law court, in 54 BC. A pattern of construction and destruction went on for the Forum for hundreds of years, starting in 27 BC. With Rome's first emperor, Augusta, and lasting through the 4th century AD, when the Roman Empire was conquered by the Ostrogoths. After this time, the forum fell into disrepair and almost total obscurity. For the hundreds of years following the sack of Rome, the forum was used largely as a quorum for other construction projects around Rome, including the walls of the Vatican and many of the Rome's churches. It was not until the late 18th century that the world rediscovered Roman Forum and began to excavate its buildings and monuments in a scientific manner. Some of the top sites, and you see there at the top, Via Sacra. This is the sacred road going up through the Forum itself. This is the road that everybody thought should in fact be taken. If you were going to be on government business, you were almost blessed if you were on this road. The Temple of Venus in Rome, that's the second one down here, was the largest temple dedicated to the goddess of Venus and Rome. It was, once again, built by Emperor Hadrian in 135 AD. It sits on a high hill near the entrance of the Forum and is inaccessible to tourists. The House of the Vestal Virgins. Okay, this space contains remains of the house of the priestesses who tended to the flame of the Temple of Vesta. Surrounding a couple of the rectangular ponds are approximately 12 statues, many of them headless, which depict some of the high priestesses of the Vestal cult. And the Basilica Aemilia. Basilica was built in 179 BC and was used for money lending and as a meeting place for politicians and tax collectors. It was raised by the Ostrogoths during the sack of Rome in 410 AD. Santa Cosma et Dominio. Okay, this is a really sort of nondescript building, and you'll see the entrance, what I'm talking about. But inside the building itself, like other facilities throughout Rome, it is phenomenal. It's a small church, relatively speaking. Okay, the Basilica is a church of Roman Forum, parts of which incorporated the original Roman buildings. The circular building at the entrance into the Forum, not used today, was built in the early 4th century as the Roman temple, thought to have been dedicated to various Romulus, deified son of the Emperor Maxim. I can't say these names, I'll tell you what. The main building was perhaps the library of the Imperial Forum. It became a church in 527 and contains important but much restored early Christian art. As you see, the one picture of Jesus healing the bleeding woman. It's from the Roman catacombs in this church from the years 300 to 350. Once again, I point out these churches as this is not like a church that you walk through locally, where basically the altar and you have signs of the cross and that are along. It's not like that at all. Every aspect of these churches were dedicated to something as far as religion. It was Christ's life. It was a sign in the Bible or whatever. You see by this picture on the right-hand side, which happens to be the main altar of this church. Behind the church, the tapestries and the art paintings and things are absolutely beautiful. It is, it's gold inlaid. It is something that, in fact, you could sit there all day and look at this. And we'll look at some of the side chapels here in a minute. The basilica was devoted to two Arab Christian brothers who were doctors, martyr saints, Comus and Damian. It's located in the Forum of Vespasian, also known as the Forum of Peace. This is what it looks like on the inside of the church. The right-hand side is the entrance. Once again, it's rather plain, but this is on the entrance that you can use now. The entrance that you could use during its heyday was actually down about another 100 feet to the other side of the building. The importance of this basilica is it was based on the history of medicine. The brothers, once I mentioned earlier, were both physicians. They were doctors. And back then, a lot of the medicines came from the Arab countries. So when we're talking about this, we're talking about, and let's face it, if you remember correctly, the nomads had ice in the desert. I mean, this is how technically advanced they were. And in fact, when it came to medicine, a lot of our medicines that were based, well, not our medicines, but the medicines that were based in that time were done by countries in the Arab world. two brothers, as I mentioned, were physicians, and they were honored as patron saints. Veneration dating in the mid-5th century, but also in the tradition according to which Claudius Galen himself lectured in the library of the Temple of Peace. Furthermore, the centuries in this medical era, Roman physicians had their meetings. These are the side altars that are in this church. Once again, any one of these would be a main altar in the church today. The altar is important, but whenever you look at behind the altar, the paintings were absolutely beautiful. They are very large, and they are hundreds, if not thousands of years old. Once again, the people of Rome, the country of Italy, pay a lot of attention to their history. They live based on a lot of their past, and a lot of that, once again, the Catholic religion is 97% of the population of Rome. But whenever you look at this, no one comes and tries to destroy it. No one comes and tries to steal stuff because of the fact, one, no one would let them, and two, the police presence, which we'll talk about later, is everywhere. I mean, you can't take a breath without looking at an officer of the law. Mamertine prison, okay, this is right as a part of the Forum. The Mamertine, according to legend, the two saints, Peter and Paul, were held in prison prior to being crucified. Even though the Tullium is described as a prison, this description is a bit misleading. Mamertine is comprised of only two dark underground dungeons placed one on top of the other. The saints were supposedly held in the lower cell. You see this on the upper picture here, this pillar. It was been reported that both St. Peter and Paul were chained to this pillar, so they couldn't move. They couldn't go anywhere. Now, the interesting part, as you see over on the right inside the circle here, the inverted cross on this altar is dedicated to St. Peter, who was allegedly crucified upside down. Now, when we talk about churches, like I said, there's nothing that I've ever seen in our country, and I've been in 50 states. There's nothing here that, in fact, can even touch the magnificence of what we see there. The largest of the churches in Rome dedicated to the Virgin Mary is St. Mary Major. It is one of the city's most important and filled with artifacts and art. Every inch of the church seems to be part of a religious history. Though its beautiful 18th century facade appears Baroque, it's actually one of the oldest churches in Rome. Built around 440 AD, some of the best examples of the church's long history are the 5th century mosaics on the triumphal arch above the main altar. And you see that back in this area in the center. And once again, when you're standing there looking at this, you're absolutely mesmerized not only by what you see, but the colors that whoever did this did it right. Let me put it that way. All right. On the nave walls, which depict 36 scenes of the Old Testament, since it has been remodeled or rebuilt, Santa Maria Maggiore is one of Rome's best examples of early Christian basilica. And once again, the basilica here is used as a church. Basilica in the Roman Forum, sometimes used as a meeting place. And here's another one. Like I said, we have nothing whatsoever that would, in fact, compare to this. Santa Maria Sophia Minerva, gained its name from the site it was built upon, over the ruins of the Temple of Minerva, the ancient goddess of wisdom. Actually, the present-day basilica sits over the ruins of 3 ancient Roman temples, one for the Roman goddess Minerva, one for the Egyptian goddess Isis, and one for the Greco-Egyptian god Serapis, according to the basilica's website. Let's look at the Roman inventions we still use today, The Julian calendar. All right, this is one of the things that works on the 12 months. And each month had a name like Augustus, September, Julius. And that came from the Roman world. Sewers and sanitation systems, once again, they started building those in Italica outside of Seville, and they moved them back in whenever they started to rebuild Spain itself, or not Spain, but Rome after the fire. Concrete was an invention of the Romans. Up until that time, the Colosseum wasn't held together, the bricks weren't held together by concrete, it was held together by iron. They had iron clips that went in and held everything together. Roman numerals are still used today. The Roman numeral system uses letters in Latin opposed to numbers, and it is a numeral system has many defects, but it still survived through today. Newspapers were published in the form of written sheets featuring stories of the day and were circulated or posted by the authorities from the Roman government. Newspapers were also published on stone or metal. These were put up in Roman forms for everybody to read. More things that the Roman invented. Bound books. Properly bound book as we know it was invented in Rome. You see the pictures there to give an example on the right. Surgical tools and techniques. Once again, tools like bone drillers, scalpels made of bronze, things like that. Many of these things came from, as I mentioned earlier, the Arabian countries. Caesarean section was invented during Caesar's reign of Rome. That's how they got that name. Roman law. Okay, Roman law is the 12 tables of Roman law is the basis of many of the parts of law that we use today, including habeas corpus and pro bono, which is still used by lawyers. Those terms are still used by lawyers today. The postal service that we have today is based on the service offered by Augustus Caesar that formalized postal service came into practice. Originally known as the Circus Publicus, the postal service was run and operated by the government. Traffic signs. They had street signs that in fact went along the Roman roads from the furthest part of the Roman Empire, being out in England, what is known now as England, all the way back to Rome itself. If you're traveling, you would have road markers. Today you see them if you drive the turnpike, you see road markers telling you how many miles you're in. Well, that's exactly what the Romans did. Fast food restaurants. They offered fast food, including what would be considered today as pizza, sausage. That would be something that they would be looking at. The Romans were busy people, all right? They didn't have time during the day. And once again, they were going to the baths to do their political activities, or maybe just to get in there and just relax a little bit. But they did that to, in fact, like you said, read at the library and things. So they didn't have a lot of time, so they'd go by the street vendors and pick up fast food. That's something we still do today. Rome's influence on government and democracy today. Rome had the first elected officials. The primary influence on modern government is the concept of elected officials. Rome didn't just go with whoever was in the top 1% ran the country. They actually worked into the idea that they would have soldiers who worked their way up through the military, who in fact then had the opportunity to become part of government. This led into the different branches of government. This is another thing brought to us from the Romans. The other important thing the Romans brought is democracy is the division of the executive, legislative, and judicial branch. The birth of legislation came from Rome. Roman society recognized two distinct classes, the patrici and the Peters, you can read it there, and noble-born, or plebeians, and the common folk. All right. In the birth of Rome, they held virtual no rights whatsoever. The common folks held no rights. And in the order to obtain them, they fought for a long time, which then the plebe, internet slang term plebe, comes from meaning the commoner. And equity before the law. This was something the Romans introduced, that everybody, no matter what their status, had equity before the courts. And they were, in fact, taught that, they believed it, and they shared it with us over the years. The Constitution of Rome, I'm not going to go back, but you can see that you had the tribal assembly in the bottom, the Senate, and the century assembly at the top. These are the organizations, the executive magistrates on the right-hand side. They had certain things that they were in charge of, just like our family division today and our criminal division in courts. They had the same kind of things. They had it all broken down. We're coming down towards the end of our program, but this is something that I thought was really interesting. When we were there, the police don't slow down for crosswalks. If you're standing in the crosswalk, they in fact go flying up to you. They blow their sirens a couple times, and you better separate because they're not going to slow down. The vehicle on the right-hand side was one of them, not this vehicle, but one just like it. It's a Ferrari. And they have police cars as Ferraris and Lamborghinis. It's quite interesting to see whenever you see them going around the streets of Rome. But they get to wherever they want to as fast as they want to get there. Hey, there is a Steeler and Penguin bar in Rome. And it is an honest-to-God Steeler and Penguin bar. As you'll see, this is the entrance. I'm not going to try to say the name, but it is a really fun place to be. It's out of all the 459 nightclubs or nightlife in Rome, it rates one of the top, number 5. It's only 100 steps off the Plaza Navona toward the Tiber River. It has some of the best prices. It has, just everything you want in a place to go visit. You'll notice on the Terrible Tower over here, it's a little bit different. It has the Colosseum, but you'll see the sign in the center, you're in Steeler country, and believe me, when you go there during a Sunday afternoon, you know you're in Steeler country. There must be 300 or 400 other Steeler fans from all over the world that go to this bar every football game. Same with the Penguins. They don't get left out either. This bar handles all Pittsburgh and, well, any sports related to Pittsburgh. It's a fun place to be. The guy who owns it, Giovanni, will be more than happy to talk to you about anything. You can go ahead and talk to him about any of his recommendations of places where you can go and eat. It's really quite a lot of fun to be. The travel tips. Like we talked before, purchase your tours before you get there and jump the line trip. Make sure that the tour you purchase, though, gets more than just getting you ahead of the line. We went to St. Peter's Basilica, and the woman was very knowledgeable about everything in the Basilica. We went to the Colosseum, and as soon as the girl got us into the Colosseum, she walked away. She didn't have anything else to deal with us. Walking shoes. From 9 o'clock till noon, we walked over 16,000 steps. So take your walking shoes if you go there. Once again, this is after they finally open up the country again. Pickpockets are everywhere in Rome and in every European city and metro area, so please be very careful. Don't eat in the local tourist sites. That sounds like a contradiction, but Rome has, unlike Spain that hides their trash, Rome puts the trash bins usually right in front of a restaurant. So when you're sitting on the sidewalk trying to eat, this aroma is striking you, and it just ruins everything you try to eat. So just, once again, you go off the beaten path, go to the Steeler bar, and you're in good shape because they moved their trash bins away from the restaurant, probably put them in front of somebody else's restaurant, I don't know, but it worked out pretty well. Don't act like a typical tourist. The most embarrassing thing as an American is standing anywhere and hearing another American swearing. It's like they believe that these people speak in Italian and they don't know what English is. Well, believe me, Americans have been there. They know English perfectly, especially every swear word, and they know what it means. Tips on tipping in Italy. They never used to tip, and the reason why is because they get paid on a monthly wage. It's not like our restaurants where they have a lower wage and they expect to make up the difference in tipping. Usually, Americans have been there, and all throughout Europe, they have been tipping, so people are getting more used to that. But if you're going to tip between 10 to 15%. Don't go get crazy with the 50% tip or anything, because once again, these people make a living wage. And the last thing I want to bring up is on YouTube, to get an idea of what these areas looked like whenever they were brand new as comparison to what they are today. There's a YouTube presentation. It's Roma Then E Now. And if you want to go on YouTube and look at this, it gives you a really good idea on how what the city looked like, what the Colosseum looked like, what the Palatine Hill looked like, and everything else. So it's one of those things that you really should, if you want to take a comparison, it would be a good opportunity to, in fact, take a look at. Well, that's all I have for today. I hope you've enjoyed the trip to this part of Italy. Next time, we'll be going to Osteoteca, which is a completely found city, and I say found because it's only been found for about 50 years. It was buried by Roman soldiers, and it was uncovered. They covered it with hundreds of tons of dirt, hundreds of millions of tons. This is about a 200-acre parcel. They covered it under dirt. Whenever they removed the dirt, the street signs are still on the buildings, and this place is 2,000 years old. It's really neat, and you can see how they, in fact, came up with their idea of building codes and how single-family housing and multifamily housing in the business district and everything else. But we'll also be going up to Pisa and Milan and Stresa and Lake Como. So this is going to, hopefully you'll be interested in that area. We're going more to the north at this time. Pisa is interesting because all the buildings lean. It's not just the leaning tower of Pisa. Every building in Pisa leans. So, I mean, like I said, these are all things that we picked up. Hopefully you enjoyed it, and we'll look forward to seeing you very soon. Thank you.